Hi Year 6, the PowerPoint for this lesson should also be available for you on Google Classroom. There's going to be quite a few tasks and things in this video. After I've explained it, if you just pause the video just so that you can still see the task until you have finished completing it. There are quite a few extra tasks and video links here and there, which whether or not you'll be able to do them is going to depend a little bit on whether you've got things like a printer or some other equipment and things at home. This first task is just to see what you might already know about things like the blood, the heart and the circulatory system. So on a piece of paper or in your books, if you want to draw a mind map just to show what you already know, this just here is an idea of what you could maybe use to lay it out. This might take you longer if you know a little bit more, or this might be quite a short task depending on your existing knowledge. What we're aiming to achieve for this lesson is to get a little bit of an idea about how the heart works, explain a little bit of how the heart acts as a pump, and explaining and understanding a little bit about the fact that blood is pumped to all parts of the body. So starting with the heart, if you want to make a fist, doesn't matter which hand, and clench your fist, that's about how big your heart is now. Now that does mean that your heart will get a little bit bigger as you get bigger. Thinking then about what the heart is and what the heart's made of. So your heart is made of muscle, so it's probably the most important muscle in your entire body, and exercising regularly is important for your heart because just like your other muscles, when you exercise it makes that muscle stronger, and so the more exercise you do, the more that your heart has to work, the stronger that muscle becomes. Your heart's main job is to pump blood around your body. And your heart does that by squeezing and contracting those muscles to force the blood out of the heart and around either the body or up to the lungs. You might be wondering then, where does the heart pump all of this blood? So this diagram shows quite a few of the blood vessels in the body. This isn't even showing all of them, but this is showing you quite a few of the blood vessels in the body. So we can see that the heart has to be able to pump blood to things like all the way down to the ends of your fingers, end of your toes, so some places that are quite far away. Now your heart doesn't pump your blood all in just one go, in one single loop around the body. Your heart actually has this double circulation, or this figure of 8 circulation, where one half of the heart will pump blood to the lungs and the other half of the heart pumps the blood to the rest of the body. This is important because the lungs supply oxygen into the blood that you will have breathed in, and then that oxygen goes back to the heart, and then your heart will then pump that blood that contains oxygen around your body to all the different parts of your body that are going to need it. Looking then at this simple diagram of the heart, is that we can see that there are 4 chambers there, which we're going to look at labelling in a little bit, but we can see that right down the middle of this image there's a barrier there. Now, as I said before, this is all made of muscle, so those paler pink sections are going to be the muscle of the heart, whereas the blue section and the red section are going to be our 2 halves of the heart and the 4 chambers. So that bit down the middle is called the septum, and what that does is it keeps the side of the heart that's containing oxygenated blood separate from the side of the heart that contains deoxygenated blood. What I've now added in the second picture are some of the blood vessels. Now the heart is going to be receiving blood through blood vessels, and it's then when the heart pumps it's going to be forcing blood out of the heart through different blood vessels. And then we can see on this diagram that we're giving some names to those 4 chambers. So the top 2 chambers are the right and the left atrium, and the bottom 2 chambers are the right and left ventricle. You might be wondering at this point why the right side of the heart seems to be on your left side and why the left side of the heart seems to be on your right side. Now all anatomy diagrams such as the heart are all flipped in this way, and it's all as if it were a person facing you. So if you were to imagine that somebody was holding the diagram or holding the picture of the heart up against themselves, then it's going to be flipped the other way around. Alright, your next task then. So there's a link on the PowerPoint here which does have an animation where you can hover the stethoscope over the person and try to listen to the sound of the heart beating. Now, if you do have access at home to a stethoscope, then you might be able to listen to your own heart beating or a member of your family. What I'd like you to do for this is to try to describe the sound and what you think might be causing the sound. What you can also try to do is see if you can find your pulse. Now, anywhere where an artery, which is a type of blood vessel, is near the surface of your body, you can feel your blood rushing through that artery. And one place where we can do that is in the wrist. So you can use the image there. So it's 2 fingers down from your wrist and just put a little bit of pressure and you might be able to feel your pulse. This task is going to be one of your main tasks for today. So there's a website link there on the PowerPoint, or you can scan that QR code to take you there. And there's loads of information there about the heart, about how the heart works, how it functions as a pump, the different chambers, the different blood vessels. There's also a video link there which is on the PowerPoint and which will probably be also added onto Google Classroom. Using those 2 pieces of information, what I'd like you to do is to try to make a fact file about the heart. So including information like what is the heart made of, what are the different sections of the heart called, what does the heart do, and any extra information that you find that you think is particularly interesting. You don't need to worry too much about trying to include a diagram at this stage, because there's a later task that's actually an optional task where you could use that to include a nice diagram of the heart instead. After watching that video for the task, you should have a little bit of an idea now about how the heart and the circulatory system work. So there's 4 different opinions here, and what I'd like you to do for each of them is to write down whether you agree with what they've said and why. So for each of them, you might think that that sounds silly, or you might agree with what they're saying, and for each of it, I'd like you to give your opinion nice and clearly. This diagram of the heart shows slightly more detail, and this could be useful if you do choose to do the optional task, or you might want to include a picture like this in your facts file if you don't print out and make that model of the heart later on. We just revisit for a second this idea of the double, or this figure of 8 circulation, where we've got, as I said, one side of the heart pumping blood to the lungs to collect oxygen and the other side of the heart pumping blood to the body. Now that's quite different from the heart and from the circulation that we see in some other animals. And so your next task is going to be to do a little bit of research about some other animals. Now humans and other mammals have this 4-chambered heart, which we've looked at so far with that double circulation. What I would like you to do though is to find out a bit of information about some other animals. Good choices for this is going to be birds, fish and reptiles. What I'd like you to try to find is if there are any animals that have hearts that have got 3 chambers. Can you find any that have got a heart with only 2 chambers? What else is different about that animal's heart or circulatory system to make that system work? How can they survive with maybe only 2 chambers or with 3 chambers? Whereas, as we've said before, for us, we need to have 4 chambers with those 2 separate sides of the heart in order for our circulatory system to be efficient. So how do they cope? What's different about the way that they live, or the way that they move, or their size, their shape, all kinds of different things that means that they can have these differently structured hearts and still be able to survive and function. This last one is the optional task that I mentioned earlier in the video. So there is a PDF document on Google Classroom and you'll need to follow the instructions there really carefully. There's some different things to colour in, some different parts of the heart, and some things to cut out, and then to try to kind of connect it all together. So you'll have one section that's got the heart, so you can see the 4 chambers, and then there are some blood vessels there, there's some valves there as well that you can add, and a section that's then the front of the heart as well. So you can colour those in, you can cut those out, and try to put it together and try to add as many labels as you can. Now, I don't have a printer at home, so what I did is that I drew out the pieces onto paper and then coloured them in and cut them out. Now, obviously, I'm much more familiar with the anatomy of the heart, so I was much more able to do that. But if you do have access to a printer, or maybe you could even trace over it from an iPad or something like that, is that you can have a go at that. So what I'm going to show you now is just my pictures of mine and just a quick short stop motion animation that I made just to show the flow of blood through the heart. This bit shows the flap over the top that shows the external features of the heart. I've drawn on where I know that there are blood vessels and kind of markings in the muscles, but you can just leave this totally plain as well. And because it is made of muscle, we can see that it looks like this kind of large, just big chunk of muscle, because as I said, it's the most important and one of the strongest muscles in the body. In this next picture, you can see the different chambers and you can see the blood vessels and you can see the labels on there as well. So I've labelled on there the right side, the left side of the heart, those top two chambers, the right and left atrium, the bottom two chambers, the right and left ventricles, and the blood vessels. So we've got the vena cava, the pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein, and the aorta. Now, in the animation that I'm going to show you, I'll talk just a little bit about how the blood flows through and what order it passes through all of these different sections. So I started with my drawing, or for you, you're cutting out of this basic structure, and then following the instructions, I'm adding on the different shaped blood vessels there. The only one that's a little bit tricky are just these top ones where they do actually, one kind of curves around behind the other. And there you've got it with the flap on the top. Then I'm labelling on the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium and the left ventricle. So I've chosen to colour code the labels. I'm labelling on the vena cava, which is bringing blood from the body, the pulmonary artery, which is taking blood to the lungs, pulmonary vein, bringing blood from the lungs, and the aorta, which takes blood to the body. And you can see now we've got these arrows showing the blood flow. So the blood will come back from the body, entering into the right atrium. As you can see, those two arrows. The blood then moves down from the right atrium into the right ventricle. That right ventricle will then contract. It will squeeze the blood up and into the pulmonary artery, which does branch out into two. The reason for that is that you've got two lungs. So the pulmonary artery takes the blood to both of the lungs. The blood then enters back in from the pulmonary vein. Again, you can see two, one for each lung, into the left atrium, down into the left ventricle, which will then contract, squeezing the blood out, pumping the blood out into the aorta, which will then take the blood out all the way around the body, all the way to your different organs, until eventually the blood comes back in through the vena cava again.